It's warm out and got me thinking about summer and just enjoying comic books when I was a kid. To go up to the comic book store on Saturday and bring some stuff home and spend Saturday afternoon kind of like paging through these comics in the cool dark of the air conditioning. What a way to spend your summer. Oh, I spent a lot of time outside too, but that memory of comics, you know, it's a really good memory. In that vein, I thought I would talk about some of my favorite graphic novels. This is not a definitive list. It's literally the ones that I saw. I'm like, oh yeah, I like that one. Yeah, I'll talk about that. So here we go. Michael Moorcock's Hawkmoon. It's a reprint of a black and white graphic novel. It retells Michael Moorcock's Hawkmoon story, which is 4 books. I'm not going to try and remember the titles of all the books, but there's 4 original novels. Those Hawkmoon novels, just like a lot of Michael Moorcock stuff, is really short. So these are like novels that are, I don't know, like 150 pages in like mass market paperback, the little paperback size, you know, somewhere in that range, usually sub 200 pages. So these are very short novels, very pulpy. Moorcock is a foundation guy for sword and sorcery type stuff. This is a retelling of that Hawkmoon story in graphic novel form. When I read this, it reminds me of like these Bible, like graphic novels or Bible comics that they had. They would put in hardback and like, I guess, I don't know if my parents bought them for me or I don't know how I got a hold of them. Usually it was telling stories about Jesus or biblical stories, which I actually quite like biblical stories and Bible stories. It reminds me of those. And so there's this weird, like sword and sorcery, pulp fantasy mixed with Bible story vibe I get. There's no, does it read like a Bible story or anything at all? I really like it. It's a really good telling of it. I love the artwork. There's some really detailed, dark art in there. Not dark necessarily in theme, although it kind of is sometimes, but just the atmosphere is these very heavy, lots of blacks and kind of muddy blacks, and it just kind of, there's not a lot of definitive detail sometimes, though sometimes there's tons, and it makes for a very interesting experience because you can't quite be certain what you're looking at sometimes, and that kind of, so when you get all this detail and then sometimes the detail gets muddy and you're not quite certain what you're seeing, kind of adds a little something actually. It doesn't seem to take away. There's 2 volumes. I know when I had to get the second volume, and I think I had to buy it from a secondary seller. It might be back in print. I think it's worth checking out if you like Michael Moorcock stuff. I think it's really good, and it's a decent amount of content for the price. Just I guess be careful with how much you're going to pay. It's kind of a recent graphic novel, and I actually really enjoy it, and that's Mr. Miracle, Tom King and Mitch Gurins. I know I'm terrible with names. I didn't prepare for this video at all, so that shows. It's got this really cool kind of like, I don't know how to describe it. Like everything's like, it reminds me of like a TV where like the red, blue, and green, like a projection type TV where the colors aren't perfectly lined up sometimes. I always liked Mr. Miracle as a character. I always thought it was kind of neat. And here it talks about Mr. Miracle, but really it's a story about relationships, his relationship to Big Barb. I think it's Big Barb, isn't it? And I really liked it. A very moving and intense story in that sense, where the sort of superhero stuff is really in the background. It's really a character study of those 2 characters, and like it talks a lot about depression. I guess I should say huge warning for people about suicide and depression, because it's pretty intense. I probably should talk about it in detail at some point, but I just really like this book. Very moving, very, very, I guess, powerful is a good word to use. In this case, I don't think I'm overusing it. Really recommend Mr. Miracle. If you're just a reader, if you don't even like comic books, it's not very comic booky, actually. It kind of hopes that you know a bit about Mr. Miracle, but I think the book does a good job of sort of introducing you and sort of following through that. His powers are kind of like, are they magical or are they sort of like illusion type stuff, like to be able to escape anything? I love the character, and I love reading stuff about Mr. Miracle if I get to see it. And this book is so great. Yes, it gets pretty heavy into stuff about suicide and depression, and I think that you need to be aware of that, but I think that it really handles it so well and beautifully. So highly recommended. Love this book. Don't think in this list you can get more amazing artwork and more really cool, fun story than in Mark Schultz's Xenozoic. Now, I believe that you can get I believe he's written a little bit more, and I think they've republished this with more stories, which makes me go, man, I guess I could get that one too. Amazing illustrator, really wonderful black and white art, really, really good stuff. And this book is where the concept of Cadillacs and dinosaurs comes from. There was a cartoon at one time, and I think originally some of these stories were called Cadillacs and Dinosaurs, but the term Cadillac is like copywritten. So I think he had to get like special permission for some of that stuff, and so I think moving forward, they just went to Xenozoic. But really great, pulpy dinosaur stories, very reminiscent of like Lost World stuff, sort of set in the future. Jack Tenarak, and Hannah Dundee are the two characters. Jack is the main character. He fixes up old cars, drives these Cadillacs around, right? Has all these encounters with dinosaurs and weird sort of like, I don't know, sort of like subhuman, mega intelligent sort of alien type things. If it sounds neat, if you like it, especially if you like Lost World type stuff, really good. I mean, that concept, that Lost World concept is a very summer idea to me. I saw somebody did a review recently on Michael Crichton's Congo, which I've never read, but I remember seeing the movie, and even though the movie wasn't great, I still kind of liked it. And made me want to really read that book, so I actually do want to read the book. I didn't watch the review. Mike's books reviews, he's like huge. Anyways, he did one on it, and I was like, yeah, I probably should read that book at some point. This one is, I absolutely love this, but it's tough to recommend only because it is very difficult to get a hold of, and it's generally incomplete. But they did a reprint of Vincent Sergalis' I think he's Italian, The Mercenary. Really amazing artwork, very really cool, like fantasy thing with this guy, the mercenary, has these sort of like flying, kind of like dragon-like creatures that they fly around and have lots of fights, and there's some kind of like a consistent, somewhat interconnected story, but really it's like excuses to see really cool like dragon-like monsters and creatures and naked women. Gorgeous painted artwork, violent, nudity is tasteful. I don't know that women have a very prominent role in here. I don't know, it's pulp. I guess we shouldn't expect too much for it, or we shouldn't be too surprised, at least. Two versions of this. This was recently reprinted. This hardback version, which is really great, really lovingly reprinted. They did two, and I think you can still get these pretty reasonably. These are still pretty reasonably priced, but there's 8 in total. I think I remember saying that the reception was so weak that they canceled plans to print any more. So you can get the rest, and I recommend that you try to look for them if you're interested, if you especially like these, but you are going to pay for them. There's obviously internet sources where you can find this stuff. At least you could check it out. Probably you could do that. You know, I wouldn't do it with anything that's still in print, which everything I've shown you so far is already in print, except for maybe this. I would encourage you, if you decide to do that, to check out and see if you like something, that you absolutely don't want to spend the money. If you decide to read it and you enjoy it, you should buy it if you like it. And then one more. This one's a weird one. I read this originally in I think the term I originally heard was a scandalization, but it's also sometimes called a fan dub. Usually that's associated with like Japanese manga because that's what's super popular, but this is not Japanese. And that's essentially where someone takes a comic book that is not translated into English and they do a fan translation, and then they sort of share it in a digital format. The understanding is usually that if the book ever gets a translation, that they'll kind of like stop sharing that and that you'll be expected to go buy it. That's how I originally read this. As far as I know of, there is 0 translation. I had to buy my copy from Germany, and it's in Spanish. And that is Kraken. It's a black and white comic. Think about like the movie Sin City, like that vibe, very similar to that, like riddled with crime. It follows the story of a lead detective, I think he's the lead detective, on a water patrol, except they patrol the sewers in a boat, and there's this giant sort of strange amorphous tentacled like creature called Kraken that just randomly shows up. So there are crime stories where this monster occasionally shows up and horrible things happen if you're around. Very graphic book, so I have to be a little careful what I show. It's a much older style of art, and yeah, in Spanish. So if you want to read it, I don't even think that I could, in a search, came up with a translation into English. There's another series, same pairing, I believe, Toro, something like that, which follows a criminal. It's kind of like gangster. If you like that kind of stuff, this is a really cool graphic novel. Really kind of an unusual thing you don't find. And this is not in print. Don't know of any translation. You are going to be buying a used copy, and if you're an American, you'll be buying it from overseas, almost certainly. If you can find a translation, great. You can find it digitally and translate yourself. That's pretty easy to do. You can sort of like screenshot it and then highlight the text in your screenshot and then port it to Google Translate, or sometimes your photo, unlike on the iPhone, I think their photo thing will actually have a thing to say translate right there. That sounds very tedious. I think it's worth it. I think it's fun. It's kind of a fun process, actually. You know, you kind of like, you don't get a really great translation because Google Translate is only so good, but you get a really interesting and sort of curated experience that way, that your reading is going to be kind of unique. It's a lot of fun. I paid about $60 for that, which is a little bit steep, but I really wanted to talk about it. Maybe I'd like to do something a little bit more about scanlation in general and talk about that. I'm actually okay with scanlation. I know that might sound bad because it's generally that's synonymous with taking somebody's work and distributing it digitally for free. That is a resource. I don't know if I'm going to get ousted or people are going to get upset with me for saying this, but I think it's a resource. I think it's a good resource too. I think it's good to see if you want something like this, to look at it and kind of peruse it, and then if you like it, to go buy it. It's kind of hard to justify say, well, go buy this $50 graphic novel that's out of print and in the wrong language from overseas, and you'll pay a lot for shipping because shipping is crazy right now. And then you might say, I hate this. I don't want that to happen to you. So I think it's a good resource. I think it's something that you can use. You can look at something, give it a sample, and if you start to like it, even if you finish the whole thing and you read it, I would strongly recommend to buy that stuff, even if it's out of print. Because that traffic and stuff like this, even if it's not like the original artists aren't really getting anything, or their families per se, buying it secondary, I think that traffic signifies that there's an interest in it, and that could help to get those kinds of things reprinted. At least it's one step in the right direction. I think it's worth taking the time to do it. I don't think there's anything wrong with reading those, as long as you don't read them, use them, love them, and then pay nothing. It also kind of lets you try things that maybe you wouldn't have spent the 20, 30 bucks on. If I had never read it the way I had read it, I would not have spent 50 or 60 bucks on it. I just wouldn't have done it. Anyways, thank you. Appreciate you watching. Hopefully this was interesting, entertaining. Go try some comics. This is the time of year when that stuff works.